Well, welcome to our webinar on the Zero Emission Technology Inventory Tool, which we call ZETI. So ZETI is an online, publicly available, and interactive tool that catalogs all existing and announced models of zero emission trucks and buses. So we can go to the next slide, please. So in terms of just some housekeeping, I know most of you have gone through this before, just like airline announcements these days, but the session is being recorded. The recording is going to be posted online at globaldrivetozero.org website. The slides will be made available upon request. And in case you would like to raise a question, like for discussion at the end of the session, please type the question in the Q&A box that you see on the lower end of the screen. And in terms of the agenda, so next slide, please. First we'll cover some updates on the Drive to Zero program, just to provide some context on the tool, and then cover some of the motivations, how ZETI started. Then obviously one of the most exciting parts, the actual live demo. And then afterwards, we're going to give you some just released insights from the data behind the tool. And then we'll open for discussions. So we're really interested to hear your questions and get feedback as far as what you would like to see in the tool in future versions. So with us today, in addition to myself, I'm Cristiano Passanha. I'm Global Director at CallStart. So I oversee the Drive to Zero program. And we're also going to have Kevin Leon, who is a program manager at CallStart, and one of the first people who envisioned the tool and one of the main developers as well. And then we're going to hear from Chase LaCroix, who is responsible for all of the analytics like behind the tool. So let's go and get started. In terms of the Drive to Zero program, whose objective is really to accelerate the uptake of zero emission commercial vehicles. So we're talking trucks and buses, and some off-road equipment worldwide. And the program was launched in September of 2018. And we have achieved incredible momentum through strong partnerships, communications, and tools. So in terms of partnerships, we currently have over 80 pledge partners. So those are manufacturers and fleets and governmental agencies and utilities and other knowledge organizations who have agreed to work together to accelerate this market for zero emission commercial vehicles. So in addition, we have formed very strong regional partnerships in Canada and Europe, and we have important partnerships lined up in China and Brazil. And in addition, we partner with other like organizations, at the global level, such as the Transport Decarbonization Alliance and the Clean Energy Ministerial, and hoping to make a lot of progress in other markets such as India coming next. So we've obviously, before COVID, we have had many engagements globally in North America, in Europe, South America, and China. But with COVID, we've had to change a lot of our engagement to a series of digital dialogues that are going to be upcoming, and you definitely hear from us on those. So as far as tools, which is a little bit more what we're going to tackle today, we have a policy and action toolkit, which is a compendium of tools that government and industry can use to accelerate this market for zero emission commercial vehicles. Then we have our ZETI tool we're going to cover today. Also a total cost of ownership calculator, which is applied to California today, and coming next, we're going to develop an infrastructure planning guidance on helping fleets really to scale up from a pilot phase to commercialization phase. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Kevin Leon, who will take us from now on about the ZETI tool.
Great. All right. Thank you, Cristiano. And hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Kevin Leong. I am a program manager at CalSTART and helped lead the technical development of the zero emission technology inventory. And now in just a few moments, I am going to give you a live demo of how ZEDI works. And while we designed the tool to be intuitive for the end user, it is packed with a lot of cool functionalities and features that we don't want you to overlook. So whether you've used ZEDI before or are seeing it for the first time, it's my hope that everyone tuned in right now will learn something new from this demonstration. But before I jump into that, let me first give you some additional context and share the origin story of ZEDI and how this all got started. So about a year ago, we started thinking about what types of resources we could make to accelerate the clean transportation market. And so we tapped into our partners, and in discussion with our friends at C40 Zero Emission Freight Network, EV100, we began to learn that fleets, governments, and NGOs really had a lack of visibility into the commercial availability of zero emission vehicles. So with that, we thought that developing a tool addressing this problem would be highly valuable and would help both cities and fleets better understand where the zero emission vehicle market is today and where it is going in the near future. And this is where the idea of a zero emission technology inventory really began to take shape. And before we started doing any development work, we first wanted to see if there were any resources out there that were similar to this idea we were envisioning. And that's when we came across this web-based lookup tool by Transport for London called Locity. This tool was designed to help fleets identify low emission vehicles based on vehicle platform, which would then help fleets strategize for infrastructure planning so they could comply with London's ultra low emission zone. Now, Locity was designed with a linear user experience, and what I mean by that is when a user selects a vehicle type, they are then prompted to select a series of use case parameters such as driving environment, typical vehicle utilization, and daily mileage. And then once that information is inputted, the tool will then display recommended low emission vehicles that would then fit those parameters. But each time that you want to select a new vehicle type, you would then have to start the process over again and then follow these same set of steps. And now this is a great design when there's a specific group being targeted. And for Locity, that group is fleet operators. But for ZEDI, we had to think much more broadly in terms of use and functionality because we see this tool as a way to provide value across multiple industry groups. So we can go to the next slide here. Great, okay. So for fleets and governments, ZEDI can be used to inform fleet procurement decisions and policy actions by showing which zero emission vehicles are available in their regions and when additional vehicles are expected to come to market. Additionally, it provides insight on how other regions are doing and how accelerated actions could potentially bring these models to their market. For manufacturers, we see ZEDI as a resource that will better inform potential fleet customers of when zero emission vehicles are expected to become commercially available, providing much greater visibility into the market. And then fleet users can also access vehicle profiles that will provide information on a vehicle's range, size, and payload specifications. This information can often be hard to track down and is not always easily accessible, which is why we wanted to capture this information in the ZEDI database and have it accessible through the dashboard. So this will allow fleets to see in a quick snapshot which vehicles are able to meet their duty cycle needs or operational requirements. And then finally, we want this tool to help inform expansion plans by highlighting where robust zero emission supply chains are already in place. So enough talk, let's go ahead and get into the exciting bits and transition to the live demo. And we can show you how we packed all of this information and functionality into ZEDI. So as Bonnie is bringing up the tool, so ZEDI is currently live and can be accessed by going to the Drive to Zero website. And we'll have it up here in a second. Great, thank you, Bonnie. And you can find the tool by clicking on the tools header here at the top. And then this will bring you to our suite of tools that we developed for the Drive to Zero program. But today we're going to focus on zero emission technology inventory. All right. And let me go ahead and go to full screen here. Great. All right. So this is what ZEDI will look like when you first load the tool. By default, you'll be able to see all of the vehicle data that has been uploaded into the ZEDI database. So all the vehicle manufacturers, platforms, and regions are currently being displayed, but really the magic in this tool is when you get down into the filtering. First, a few points on some of ZEDI's design features. You can see that this dashboard consists of multiple visualization elements. And this was our intent because it gives users access to large amounts of data in an easily digestible format. Much of ZEDI's design is driven by what is called icon-based navigation. And as we hover our mouse along different vehicle platforms at the top, you will notice that these icons will react and become highlighted. And these icons act as buttons that users can interact with and click on. And the same goes for the vehicle manufacturer logos, as well as the regions in the map. Now, as I mentioned earlier, our intention was to develop ZEDI for a broad user base, so we didn't want to create a linear user experience that would cater towards a specific group. Instead, we wanted to lay everything out in a way that would allow users the maximum flexibility to interact with ZEDI in a way that is most meaningful to them. So, for example, a policymaker would perhaps not be interested in a particular manufacturer, but would rather be more interested in looking at zero emission availability across their region. So I'm going to move my mouse over to the map section and try selecting a region. And as you can see, as we hover over the map, there is a text box that appears specifying what region we're selecting. And so I'm going to select Europe. And as soon as I select Europe, the dashboard will update, and now we're only seeing vehicle information that is based on availability in the selected region. Oh, let me try that again. You'll notice once I select Europe, let me go one more time. Perfect. So you'll notice once I select Europe, we lose a few vehicle platforms like school buses and yard tractors, which indicate that we didn't have any vehicle data within those platforms for this region. And we also lost a number of manufacturers simply because not all manufacturers have commercial available offerings in Europe. And so whatever selection you make, whether it's by region or by vehicle platform, the data will get filtered, and as a result, you will only see vehicle listings pertaining to your selection. So now that you have a basic understanding of how the filtering works, I'm going to try to simulate some real-world use cases. And so in addition to London, we know that there are other cities in Europe that are looking to establish low-emission zones, and let's say policymakers needed to understand or needed to know what types of zero-emission vehicles would be available by the end of 2021. And so to do this, I'm going to point our attention to the timeline at the bottom left corner right here. Oh, looks like we went dark for a second. Hopefully that comes back up. We'll give it another moment. Sorry about the technical difficulties here. There we go. All right. So we're going to go back to full screen. And again, I'll select Europe. Great. All right. So we're back. So again, I want to point your attention to the vehicle availability timeline in the bottom left-hand corner once we select our region. So if we want to know what vehicles will be commercially available by the end of 2021, we have a slider above the timeline here that we can adjust and move based on the time horizon that we are interested in. So if we click this slider and we drag it to 2021, so now we are only looking at vehicles that will be commercially available by end of 2021. And everything beyond 2021 is now filtered out. And if you notice, we did lose a few more manufacturers when we did that. And we can do the same if we wanted to know what vehicles are currently available. So again, I'm going to drag this slider all the way to currently available. The dashboard will update, and now we're seeing all the platforms, manufacturers that are producing vehicle models that are currently available. Okay, so now I'm going to reset the timeline. Go back to 2023. So let's go across the pond and select our US and Canada region and run through a similar use case. For example, we know that in California, Los Angeles County recently committed to a zero emission roadmap that calls for 60% of medium duty delivery trucks to be electric by 2028. And this would be just in time for the 2028 Summer Olympics that LA is hosting. And so the question policymakers might ask is, will there be a robust enough market for zero emission medium duty trucks to achieve this goal, or should policymakers be looking for ways to strengthen supply chains and accelerate growth in this market? So although ZEDI will not project model availability out to 2028, we can at least get a sense of how many manufacturers are currently in the space and look at whether the model availability is growing year over year. So let's click on medium duty trucks in the dashboard. Oh. Here we go. And I want to quickly point your attention back to the timeline in the bottom left corner to see if anyone noticed a subtle change that occurred when I did that. You see that 2022 no longer has that lighter concentric circle that the other years have. That is because the lighter circle indicates that there are new vehicles coming to market in that year. So what this is telling us is that there are no new models reported to become available in 2022. Now, going back to our initial question, what is the current state and outlook of the medium-duty truck market? It looks like we have 15 manufacturers that currently are or will be producing medium-duty zero-emission trucks in our selected region. So if we hover over the timeline, we see that 12 models are reported to be currently available. But if we go to 2020, we see that there's quite a big jump in model availability by the end of this year, with 58 models reported to become available. And then if we look at our furthest time horizon of 2023, we see another bump in model availability at 66 total vehicles reported to become available. So this market is looking fairly strong. But we know that model availability is not the entire solution when it comes to zero-emission vehicle adoption. And so we have to put our fleet caps on and ask the question, can these vehicles meet the various duty cycle requirements of medium-duty delivery trucks? ZEDI helps us do this by displaying essential vehicle specification data. So to see this, we first need to click on a manufacturer. And I'm going to select, let's do Mitsubishi Fuso. So once I select a manufacturer, the vehicle models that manufacturer has in this space will appear below. And we see that Mitsubishi Fuso has one vehicle offering that fits our current selection. So if we hover over the model name, in this case it's the e-Canter, a vehicle profile for that vehicle will pop up. And so here you will be able to see weight class or size, estimated payload information, estimated range, and whether the vehicle is currently available. So let's do the same thing, but let's do it for another manufacturer. I'll select BYD. So it looks like BYD has two vehicle models available in this selection that we've made, the 6F and the T7. So again, if we hover over the model name, we will see this vehicle profile appear, and we can learn again, the class size, it's a class 6 truck. This truck has a payload, estimated payload of 15,000 pounds and a range of 124 miles. Now, let's say that you need more information than what's displayed on this vehicle profile. So we've made it possible for you to go directly to the manufacturer website by clicking on this link here. And when you click on this link, you'll open up another tab in your web browser, and it'll take you directly to the manufacturer page where you can find the full specifications of that vehicle, which they provide. Okay, so I'm gonna head back to ZEDI. So any fleet, whether they operate transit buses, school buses, parcel delivery trucks, or heavy duty trucks, can now come to ZEDI and have easy access to all of this zero emission vehicle information, making it, we hope, less intimidating for fleets when thinking about electrification of their vehicles. So what if we're done looking at medium duty trucks and now want to explore other regions and vehicle segments? All we need to do is double click this reset filter button in the bottom left corner. And after a second, all the filters will be reset and we will be ready to explore the inventory again. So as I conclude the demo, if you're watching this and notice that we're missing certain manufacturers and vehicle models, please let us know. We are really relying on industry partners to help us gather the most accurate and up-to-date information. And since the zero emission market is rapidly changing, we don't expect ZEDI to ever be fully comprehensive of all makes and models, but our goal is to do the very best that we can. And to make it as easy and as streamlined as possible to provide input, we added a manufacturer input form right below the tool that you can fill out and submit to us directly. And if we receive a vehicle submission, we will validate the information internally. And if it all checks out, we will upload those new vehicles to ZEDI. So with that, I'm going to conclude this demo. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you found it to be informative and learned something new. I am now going to pass things over to my colleague Chase LaCroix, who will be walking us through the ongoing maintenance plan for ZEDI, and then we'll share some very interesting analytical insights that the ZEDI data is showing us. So Chase, off to you.
Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, this is Chase LaCroix, Senior Project Manager here at CalStart. I'm going to walk you through some of the results we've come to from all the data we've compiled so far. But first, I want to emphasize, as Kevin mentioned, that a lot of work went in to build this tool and the data behind it, but it's only going to remain useful as long as it's continuously maintained. So ideally, manufacturers see the value in this and will be providing updates to us whenever there is one, submitting new announcements or any corrections that might need to be made. But we'll continue researching these markets and checking in with OEM contacts regularly as well. So before I share with you the initial findings we've gathered, I wanted to note that while we have begun compiling data for all of the first mover global regions we've identified that were shown in the ZEDI tool that Kevin showed, we are by far the most familiar with the US and Canada market, and we have representative data for that market. So the following charts are all going to be focused on US and Canada, but in the future, we intend to publish similar graphics for other regions as well, as we work with our partners in those regions to further improve our data collection efforts. Next slide, please. Okay, so this chart overall is just showing the cumulatively available models on the y-axis over time. And you can see that the zero emission truck and bus market in US and Canada is on the verge of a pretty major surge. It's expected to grow in model availability by 80% by the end of 2020 relative to 2019, and will more than double by 2023, the end of our time horizon, relative to the end of 2019. So with that in mind, I wanted to ask a couple poll questions of the audience. So Bonnie, please ask the first poll question. Okay, so which medium and heavy duty vehicle type do you think has the most zero emission models commercially available at present? And I'll give everyone a few seconds to make their choice. All right, do we see results for that, Bonnie? Okay, so transit bus is the favorite with 40% selection. And coming in second, we have cargo van and medium duty truck tied. Okay, great. One more question here. Let's launch the second poll question. Which medium and heavy duty vehicle type do you expect will have the greatest growth in commercial availability in the coming 3 years? A few seconds to answer. And then Bonnie, if you don't mind posting that result as well. Medium duty trucks wins, with heavy duty trucks coming in a second and then cargo vans third. All right, well, we have a very astute audience here. Next slide, Bonnie. Can we look at the results? Okay, now we're looking at the number of cumulatively available models on the y-axis over time, but broken out by each of the vehicle types we have identified in ZETI. And the audience was correct. Currently, 2019, 2020, we have the end 2019 rather, we have the most models available in the transit bus market. But by the end of this timeline, we expect the medium duty trucks to outpace that because of the rapid growth we're expecting in the next few years. But this growth is happening across the board for all vehicle types. There's a strong uptick in 2020. Transit bus, again, as the leading segment in terms of available vehicles. Now, that's consistent with the Drive to Zero beachhead strategy, which identified this sector as the logical first success application for zero emission commercial vehicle technology. There are a few reasons for that. Among them, fixed route service with back to base operations makes it easier to provide or to schedule for charging. These fleets are often publicly funded and are thus able to lead the transition ahead of the rest of the market to zero emission technology. Medium duty trucks, well, they have the most availability on this timeline and the fastest growth. That's somewhat an artifact of how that market is structured, with many upfit manufacturers in the market offering a wide variety of body and chassis combinations. So it's a little bit higher than we might expect given medium duty truck applications. Heavy duty trucks, on the other hand, show the most consistent growth through 2023. There aren't as many models available, but they appear to be growing the fastest through this full timeline, likely due to the longer development timelines that these companies have. But full market viability is expected for heavy duty trucks in the next few years. I want to point out that the available models are not correlated with market penetration. We can see that with the medium duty trucks here. They are not as dominant in the market as this might suggest. And on the other hand, yard tractors have had a lot of success in the market across the US. There are deployments and have been for a few years now. So while there are only a handful of models available, they have definitely proven successful in their specific application. And other vehicle types will still have new models arriving in the coming years, but they're likely just not announced yet. This is our best information to date based on everything we could gather from all the manufacturers involved. Next slide, please. So now we're looking at the number of OEMs by 2023 on the y-axis. And this is here to show that there's a wide array of offerings from a broad range of OEMs in most markets. It's going to be competitive and likely more so in the next few years. I'll point out Transit Bus again, in third place here, has many companies with multiple offerings available, really showing that it's a developed market with both breadth and depth in terms of vehicle availability. The many medium duty truck and heavy duty truck providers as well, with more of these making new models available in the coming years rather than today, reflected in that rapid growth we saw on the last slide. So overall, it seems that manufacturers are getting sufficient market and policy signals that fleets want these vehicles and are progressively recognizing that there's an opportunity in zero emission commercial vehicle production going forward. Let's go to the next slide, please. All right, here we're digging into some of the actual vehicle specifications collected so far. We're looking at, on the y-axis, different lengths of bus, and on the x-axis, their range. The reported range is greatest in the 30 to 40 foot segment, which includes the standard US transit bus size of 40 feet. We have seen a lot of demo scale deployments occurring with this type of vehicle throughout the US, and the success of those efforts is leading to the next phase of large scale deployments that we are going to see in the coming years. Some examples being King County in Seattle and LA Metro, with both with announced orders of greater than 100 buses, electric buses they're going to be acquiring. And Philadelphia and New York City are leading in scale on the East Coast. There's a bit of an outlier here I wanted to point out on the low range side. This is a very specific autonomous vehicle built to support campuses and business parks, that kind of thing on a fixed loop. So it's not expected that it would need a long range to satisfy that duty cycle. And it's a little bit of an outlier here. You'll also notice that the color is showing what the availability year is for these vehicles, and there's only a handful of vehicles that will be announced or available through the end of 2020. This aligns with our beachhead strategy of the transit bus being the first successful market for commercial zero emission vehicles. Most of the models are already available today. They're out there and can be purchased. There's little need to announce vehicles coming in the next few years because you have pretty good coverage throughout the market today. And I'm sure we'll see new models in the coming years with improvements and enhancements as they're developed, but it's less, we're not seeing as many announcements of new models hitting the market. All right, let's look at the next slide, where we'll look at similar data for the truck market. So here we're showing range again on the x-axis, and on the y-axis different truck types. We can see that there's, again, multiple available options in each segment, covering a range of duty cycles. There's many announced models as well through 2023. But even today, the max range available is about 250 miles that we've seen, but at least 125 miles of range can be achieved through all of these on-road duty cycles. So it's still pretty good coverage and can serve a wide variety of needs, of fleet needs. The very long range heavy duty trucks that we're estimating to be available in the US in the coming years will have both fuel cell and battery electric options. The average range will be pulled up way higher for heavy duty trucks, which of course need to reliably meet regional haul duty cycles in order to achieve that market transformation we're going for. We've seen a couple high profile announcements from some new automakers entering the space, and it appears that that market in particular is going to be competitive with conventional vehicles on this time horizon. So it's going to be exciting to watch. The truck segments with shorter duty cycles, like medium duty trucks, step vans, cargo vans used in urban applications, are comparatively more developed today, with some models announced for the future, but most of them available now. And I also want to point out yard tractors, again, a little bit of an outlier here, because these are port or often cargo handling operations. They think of range often in hours rather than miles, and so we just had miles reported for one of the models, so not all of them are showing up on this particular plot. All right, let's go to the next slide. Okay, so here is where everyone on this call comes in. We would love any feedback you may have on this tool, any feature requests, listing edits, market updates we should be aware of. Please do reach out to us at the link provided. We look forward to your feedback and your tips to help us keep this tool relevant and make sure it's the best and most useful that it can be. And I think we have one more poll here. Bonnie, if you could launch that. Okay, which feature would you most like to see added to the ZETI tool? Give you a few seconds to answer that. All right, let's take a look at the results. Okay, and the addition of sales data is the most interesting to this group, with the greater disaggregation of geographic regions also important, and more specifications within the vehicle profile also pretty high up there. So a lot of interest in new functionality being added to ZETI. That's great to see. Okay, I believe that will do it for the slide portion of this webinar. Thank you everyone for attending. We appreciate your time and we're looking forward to your input. And I think now we'll have some time for Q&A. So I think Ben's going to be moderating that section.
Yeah, so we've gotten a good number of questions that have come in. Really appreciate everyone's intent engagement during the session, and you guys have done a nice job of walking through the tool and the data that's come out of it so far. We've received a bunch of questions regarding different types of reporting, different types of filtering functionality that's of interest. One question that's come in, I've seen from a number of participants in a number of ways, is essentially whether we are able to include off-road vehicles in ZETI. And I'm happy to take this first and invite any of my colleagues to chime in as well. So CalSTART is actively working with the California Air Resources Board on a relatively new voucher incentive program called the Clean Off-Road Equipment Voucher Project, or CORE, in California. It was begun in 2019 and launched earlier this year, or perhaps late 2019. And so for that purpose, we're very interested in cataloging, I would say, the analogous information on model availability for zero-emission non-road equipment. So that is certainly an innovation that we're currently working to implement, whether that's within ZETI and building out kind of additional tiles with different types of non-road equipment in the selection tool, or perhaps as a parallel product offering that would be specific to non-road equipment. I know we've had a few specific manufacturers reach out and request, listing of their non-road equipment. So that would definitely be something to keep an eye out for, and certainly we would look for active engagement and participation with those members of the industry to make that tool as accurate and useful as possible. We got a question about yard tractors specifically that I think maybe, Chase, this might be good for you to sort of reiterate a point you raised during your portion. So any idea why electrification growth flattens out, particularly for yard tractors, really after 2020?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it looks like a similar situation as the transit bus market. It's just on a little bit of a smaller scale. We have several options available today for fleets to buy, and these are in service around the country, working every day and having a lot of success. So it it appears there's less announcement of future released vehicles. We have a pretty good market today, and I'm sure that the companies who produce those vehicles are going to continue to refine and improve them each year. But there's less reason for them to have an announcement of a future released vehicle that doesn't exist yet. But I'd encourage you to look into the manufacturers we have listed that offer yard tractors and see the range of products they have now and how that might work with your fleet.
And specifically on driving range, we have a question about whether the mileage or distances shown reflect fully loaded or empty vehicles.
Yeah, I can take this one too. So the data we have collected here is from a variety of sources. It's from industry communications, from press releases, from postings on manufacturer websites. And we are taking the specifications that are announced and including them in this tool. So whatever the manufacturer is reporting, we want to be truthful to, and that's what we plug into the tool. So it's not always clear to us. It's not, that distinction is not always made whether the range is fully loaded or not loaded. It would depend on how each manufacturer would like to report that information.
The other point that I would just raise on top of what Chase indicated is that it's important to point out here that any of the specifications or parameters listed in the vehicle profiles in ZETI have not been independently validated by CalSTART. These are simply, you know, the metrics and figures as they're being reported by the OEMs themselves. And we are simply gathering that data and hopefully putting it together in a nice and usable format. Next question I'd like to tee up for our panelists. Maybe this could be a good one for Kevin to take. A few folks have wondered if we have created or thought of creating a similar listing for charging systems. So really getting to the infrastructure side. And another participant has asked if we would think about kind of incorporating the availability of public refueling stations, whether charging or for hydrogen refueling.
Yeah, it's definitely something worth considering. You know, there aren't always, you know, one-to-one charging solutions for these vehicles, and so you know, we would have to consider, you know, how we would organize that data. We'd have to consider compatibility of chargers with certain vehicles. And also charging power as well. So it's something that we haven't made any near-term, I guess, decisions on incorporating into the tool, but we do realize that it's a very important piece of, you know, zero emission technologies and understanding how you are going to either charge these vehicles or refuel these vehicles. So it's definitely something that we will consider in the future.
Yeah, I have a few additional thoughts about that, because obviously the infrastructure is just as important as the vehicle availability. And so within the current structure of the tool, you know, the tool is you know, is constructed in such a way, you know, to focus on the vehicles themselves. So I believe that you know, the addition of infrastructure would probably be better off for, you know, perhaps a separate tool that would work like side by side with the ZETI tool, you know, and then the two of them like would talk. So just there might be a future like improvement like as well.
Question I want to highlight for Cristiano's attention, since we'll keep going with Cristiano here. A few folks have raised questions about whether we would consider extending these listings to not strictly zero emission platforms, but potentially zero emission equivalent, as one participant has noted, such as renewable natural gas, or another participant asked a similar question about zero emission capable, so more of a plug-in hybrid system that's enabled through plug-in for kind of anti-idling or round-the-clock operations, such as a work truck.
Yeah, no, this is a really excellent question, and it touches in one of the tenets of the Drive to Zero program, that whenever we talk about the goals of the program, the ultimate goal is to achieve zero emission, vehicles. But we do recognize that some technologies that we consider, for example, near zero, they can provide a really important foundation, right? So for those segments where the zero emission technology is not quite ready yet, that we could encourage a near zero technology. And so those are really important to recognize the importance of those technologies as well. When it comes to the ZETI tool, specifically, we had to start somewhere, and we thought, well, let's just start with all the technology that are indeed zero emissions, and that's how we decided to start. And as you can see, there are quite a lot of technologies in the marketplace right now, but we can always think separately in terms of whether we would also like to broaden the scope a little bit. We haven't made that decision yet. So far, we decide to keep the availability on zero emission technologies.
Really relevant question that gets to a lot of our internal kind of team deliberations here. I'm gonna see if Chase wants to take the first crack at this one. How do we address OEM partnerships, with an example being where maybe there's a GM or a Ford product, in terms of who makes the chassis or the body, but another manufacturer is producing or providing hardware or even maybe the entire powertrain?
Yeah, that is a good question, especially because of how this market has developed. Thinking of that medium duty space again, where you can have different suppliers coming together to produce a final vehicle. The approach we've taken is to stick with whatever OEM is the one that is selling the final full product, the vehicle. So if they are aggregating a powertrain from one company, a chassis from another, and a body from a third, but selling it under their label, we would consider that truck to be have the label of that manufacturer that joined all the pieces together and provided the final fully operational vehicle to a customer. So whoever you would go to as a fleet to buy your vehicle, that's who we would call the manufacturer.
Okay, I think I'm going to take the first crack at this one. I appreciate the participant, Kyle Armstrong, for reminding me of our friend Abby Swain's message in the chat window in the Q&A box. So Abby points out that some fleet managers might hesitate to acquire electric trucks if they don't know for certain that maintenance and repair service will be available nearby, and will the tool eventually encompass those services. So I think this is a terrific point. And it actually, before I address that directly, it prompts kind of another reminder or qualification here to the information that's presented in ZETI, which is that even if we take the US and Canada module as kind of a case in point here, it's painted with I think a necessarily broad brush at this stage. But one of our future innovations, and this is why it was one of the options in Chase's final poll question, is that it will require eventually greater disaggregation of model availability within regions, because what we have found is that manufacturers are extremely responsive, and with good reason, to the presence of policies and actions that particular jurisdictions can introduce to really energize a market. So we find the greatest model availability is in place where there are, for instance, vehicle incentives or a low carbon fuel standard available for fleets to have that benefit their purchase. So California and New York are really good examples where we might expect to see the full range of vehicle availability, more or less, while it's not necessarily the case that even in other US states, a fleet would have access to all of these models. So perhaps this is more accurately characterized as potential model availability if the right conditions are in place, just given, you know, the margins, the production capacity of these providers at this time. So along with that, and more directly to Abby's question, a lot of the incentive programs we've seen introduced and we've had the opportunity to support states on implementation of do require local warranty service and, you know, maintenance capacity to be provided either in state or reasonably close. And that's so that in the New York example, which is the one I'm best equipped to speak to, you know, we want to make sure that manufacturers aren't ordering sales from offices in California and then have no provisions in place to support the fleets making those purchases. So it's critical to the success of this market that incentive funded sales be able to be supported with, you know, full service operations nearby and responsively. And so for that reason, most of the model availability data is kind of driven by the presence of incentive programs, and those incentive programs kind of come along with either an implicit or explicit requirement of local sales, maintenance, and, you know, warranty service capacity. So I think, you know, we would sort of take that as understood as part of listing a model for commercial availability, that the warranty service or maintenance capacity comes along with that, but we can look at ways to make that a little more explicit. Okay, Kevin, have you considered expanding ZETI to light duty passenger vehicles, such as light duty cars and even light trucks?
I was actually just typing in a response to Rob. Yes, good question, Rob. Because the Drive to Zero program really focuses on zero and near zero emission commercial vehicles, we haven't really focused on adding light duty vehicles to the ZETI tool. So that's the reason why our focus has been primarily on medium and heavy duty.
And I think that's really just an artifact of, you know, this being a resource, a work product of the Drive to Zero program, which does, you know, explicitly focus on medium and heavy duty. There are a lot of other resources in place for, you know, cars and trucks, and we think, you know, we're not necessarily the only tool presenting some of this information, but we hope to provide a unique perspective to centralize it in one place publicly and interactively.
Yeah, I mean, just complementing Ben's answer, one of the main like reasons for Drive to Zero is the relative less focus on zero emission commercial vehicles in comparison with the zero emission cars and light trucks, and that's especially important because those are exactly the heavy duty trucks and buses that, even though they are very small in number of vehicles, they contribute to a disproportionate amount of air pollution, of climate gases, of fuel consumption. So that's why we focus a little bit more narrowly on the commercial vehicle space.
Although I do want to point out that our inventory goes down to effectively class 2B in North America, so about 8,500 pounds or up. Maybe someone else on my team can provide that conversion to kilograms more quickly than I'm able. Maybe about 4,000 kilograms would be my guess. So something like the arrival delivery van that UPS has, you know, placed a rather large order for, that would fall into the 2B classification. in North American terms, and we certainly wanted to make sure that is reflected because it's going to be a major player, hopefully in the next few years, when it comes to urban last mile delivery. And that certainly is a relevant segment when we're looking at market development through the Drive to Zero philosophy and pathway. So that might address some of the questions that, you know, for folks who are interested in the lighter end of commercial vehicles, but not necessarily passenger cars. Hopefully, you know, there might be some representative information in this tool for you. A few questions have come in. Kevin, I think I want to address this to you on, you know, the desire to filter some of this data on performance parameters. So maybe passenger or payload capacity, maybe driving range. Can you maybe comment on how we have thought about that, and whether that's something that, you know, we might be able to look into for, you know, our 2020 or even longer term roadmap?
Yeah, it's a good question. And you know, we want this tool again to be easy for fleet operators to use and to identify if these vehicles can meet their duty cycle requirements in a way that's sufficient. And right now we don't have an ability to filter out directly by range or by, say, class or payload, estimated payload capabilities of the vehicle, though it is something that we could look into incorporating as a filter option. Maybe we would include a text box where you would enter, you know, what your actual mileage requirements are, what your payload requirements are, and then it would show you the list of vehicles that would fit those specifications. But at the moment right now, the way that you can filter down to vehicle options within the tool is by selecting platform, by selecting manufacturer, and then by the model. And so it is a step down in terms of granularity, and we can definitely look at incorporating that in a future version of the tool.
And I'd just like to quickly add that for some of the more detailed specifications people are asking for, like charge connector and things like that, where available, we're collecting that. But especially for the future, the announced models that will come in the next few years, it's often hard to or impossible to find that information. So where it's available, we're collecting it, and hopefully we can find some way to share that as Kevin described.
So Ben, I know we have plenty of other questions to be answered, but since we're 1 minute to closing here, I just wanted to provide some final comments. You know, thank you all for, you know, such an engaging discussion. I saw a few questions about where the materials are going to be available. So the tool itself, plus the graphics that Chase showed, you know, are both on the Drive to Zero website, so you can find them there. A live recording is going to be on the website as well. If you have any additional questions, you can email me or Kevin or Chase, or check our website. And like just in terms of next steps for the tool, we're going to be, you know, taking all of your feedback into consideration in terms of functionality, and really excited to see this tool moving forward and to be useful for partners like you. So with this, I would like to thank all the speakers and especially the participants for your engaged and insightful questions, and hope everybody stays safe and healthy and hopefully optimistic in this uncertain times. So thank you very much.